Thanks, Ginny. And I'm not just here as the token woman so that this isn't a manel. No, I'm delighted to be here. We're very excited about this initiative. It's one of our strategic priorities at COAR, and COAR actually stands for the Confederation of Open Access Repositories. So I'm just going to introduce the speakers, and then I will do a little wrap-up at the end. So our first speaker today is Eloy Rodriguez, and he is actually the chairman of COAR, so he's my boss. And he's also involved with the Open Air project in Europe, and he's the director of the library at University of Minho in Portugal. So please welcome Eloy.
Thank you, Kathleen, and welcome all to this session on the next generation repositories. I will just do a very short introduction, talking very briefly about COAR and the work of the next generation repositories that we launched about a year ago, and then I'll pass to the other presenters of this session, and we will go through the work that we have done until now on the user stories and functionalities, and also the work that we are currently doing on the conceptual model and on the repository technologies, and we'll wrap up at the end with the next steps and implementation, and of course opening up to your questions and comments about this. So not to use too much time on this introduction, I just want to present you briefly COAR. COAR is the Confederation of Open Access Repositories, as Kathleen has just presented, and we have a vision of a global knowledge commons based on the network of open access repositories. Open access repositories are currently ubiquitous. They already provide significant, or they already collect a significant number and a collection of research outputs, but each repository is not really valuable by itself. Its value is the possibility to interconnect them, and this is our vision. And most at the heart of this vision, also this work of the next generation repositories is really trying to promote this vision into practice of this global knowledge commons. COAR was launched and created in 2009. Is it an international association? We have 120 members from around the world, and we are pleased to have, even if COAR initially started in Europe, the percentage of non-European members has been growing steadily, and I think we are really now a global organization. And we have some main objectives and priorities. We have been acting as the strategic voice for repositories, tackling some important issues on open access policies, on the relation with other organizations. We have been working on one of our priorities since the beginning is interoperability, and also the alignment across the regions, and I will just come back to this in a minute. Also, the capacity building and training has been also one of our priorities, and I think this is very important, and our members of COAR is something that they refer very often. The opportunity, COAR offers an opportunity to really develop relationships and to have a global view of what is going around the world, because many times repositories and repository managers, they may think that the problems and the challenges that they are facing are local, but they are very particular. In some cases they might be, but in most cases the problems and the challenges that we face are the same that our other colleagues in other parts of the world are facing, and by establishing these relations, I think there is a big value on it. And on this note, I just want to refer that very recently, in our last annual meeting in Venice in May, we have established formally an international accord with organizations from around the world to promote the cooperation between the repository networks that have been being developed in several regions, in Europe, in Latin America, in China, Japan, and other regions of the world. And we think it's very important to work together with those organizations and have some common principles and actions. And bringing us to the main theme of the session today, for our vision, again, this initiative of the Next Generation Repository is really strategic. We have launched the group, the initiative in April 2016 in our annual meeting in Vienna, because probably we can look to repositories or to the repository landscape in different perspective, in a more optimistic perspective, looking at the fact that repositories are ubiquitous. Again, as I told, that they have a strong support from the community and from the research institutions, or we can have a more critical view about, for instance, the shortcomings of repository interoperability. But regardless of our more positive or more critical view about repositories, I think we probably all agree that repositories have not yet fully realized their potential, because in many cases, they are acting just as passive recipients of research outputs that have been published elsewhere. And the aim of this work is exactly to position repositories differently and to identify the functionalities and architectures that are needed for these next generation repositories that could be the foundation of this also new scholarly communication system. And so the vision is to position the repositories really as the foundation for this new scholarly communication system, distributed and globally networked infrastructure, on top of which layers of value-added service can be deployed, and so making, I think, taking back again the control of the scholarly communication system and the scholarly communication outputs, making it more research-centric, more open, and more supportive of innovation, and also collectively managed by the scholarly community. I think it's very important to have this vision. And to achieve this, we need to have a higher level of cross-repository interoperability by using and by exposing uniform behaviors that can leverage web-friendly technologies and architecture, making repositories really off the web and not just on the web. This is something that on our initial meeting in Vienna, that Herbert van den Soppel expressed clearly, and I think it's really important. And also by integrating the repositories with the existing global scholarly infrastructure, especially with the identification infrastructures for authors, institutions, etc. And to encourage the development of added value services that use those uniform behaviors to support discovery, access, annotating, sharing, etc. The group that we have get together is a very good group. I'm really very happy, very grateful to all these people that we get together from around the world with different experience, from liaising with different repository platforms. We have people from that are very active on the main repository platforms, and we have been working also since the beginning around some principles and that vision that we have formulated, and these principles that are really very important. This question of the distribution of control, because we don't want that no part of the system becomes too powerful, or that we become too dependent, that it could be again locked in. The inclusiveness, so the fact that we realize that the system must be able to incorporate and the different realities and experiences that exist on the research community, both disciplinarily and geographically. The principle of the public good and the intelligent openness. I think these are all principles that have been informing our work. Just to come to the conclusion and pass to explain what we have really achieved until now. Our methodology, until the moment, we have been working on identifying the major use case and also the functionalities and behaviors that we need for the next generation repositories. And I think this is the part of the work that is mostly completed. Now we are working on this point 3 and 4, so we are now developing conceptual models and identifying technology and architectures to be recommended, and we will hopefully by September publish the recommendations and start working on their adoption and implementation. So probably some of you are already aware that we have published exactly the user stories in March. They were open for comment. We published in February. They were open for comment until March. We have received 60 comments, and with that we review and we have been producing a revised version that will be available very soon. So, and I will pass to Peter, because he will present the work that we have been doing on the user stories and the current developments around them. Thank you.
Thanks, Eloy. So our next speaker is Peter Noth, and he's a research fellow with the Open University in the UK, and he also runs the COAR, C-O-R-E, aggregator in the UK.
Thank you very much. On the COAR Next Generation Repositories Working Group, I represent the COAR project, which is actually a partnership developed with JISC and the Open University. So one of the key aims of the COAR Next Generation Repositories Group for us is to help us to overcome the challenges that still make it pretty difficult to move beyond repositories as document silos. What we want to do is we want to see a globally interoperable network of repositories and global services, in particular, developed on top of repositories, so that they will be fulfilling the expectations of users in the 21st century. As Eloy mentioned, in February 2017, we've published a list of user stories, and we've collected really useful feedback. But one of the things that surprised us that some of the people said that or expressed that this was not particularly innovative, or they didn't see the user stories particularly innovative. So one of the questions I have for you is, do you find these stories innovative? And if not, then I'll try to convince you otherwise during my talk. So this is the repository as we know it today. Repositories, basically, we have some sort of a persistence layer. We can store publications in repositories, and we have a level of interoperability which enables us to basically, through some sort of a batch discovery process, access the metadata in the repository. That interoperability is provided by the OAI PMH protocol. And that enables us to build some services on top of repositories. And this is useful. However, more recently, repositories have been, or in the last year actually more specifically, repositories have been criticized for various kinds of things. Some people even said, for example, Eric van der Velde said that institutional repository is obsolete, its flawed foundations cannot be repaired, and the IR must be phased out and replaced with viable alternatives. I just want to mention that this we strongly disagree with all these statements, and if you look more deeply into why these people argued why the repository is obsolete, what they actually what they were really unhappy about is the lack of interoperability across repositories. My argument is that when they feel that repository is obsolete, they should look also at the publishers' platforms, which are by far less interoperable. One of the things and one of the lessons learned from this is that I believe that the lack of interoperability in the scholarly communication system is really a major barrier to innovation. And at the COAR Next Generation Repositories Working Group, we're really trying to address that issue. And that is good for everyone, both for us as scholars, for researchers, and also for the publishers, in fact, because we want to see everyone being able to participate in the scholarly communication system. So this slide shows kind of how we see the next generation of repositories. Sorry, I'm afraid the formatting is not particularly well, but never mind. So what we want to achieve with the next generation repositories is that we want to extend the interoperability capabilities of repositories. We want to see not just batch discovery, we want to see also the ability of kind of machines to navigate repositories. We want to see repositories being able to provide notifications. We want to extend the types of content repositories can expose in an interoperable fashion to metadata content, links between resources that can include, for example, citations as well, notifications. We want to see a functionality which I described in one of the previous sessions, which is called global sign-on. I'll just mention it briefly in a few seconds as well. We also want to see at the conceptual layer being able to compare usage across repositories, enable commenting across repositories, being able for repositories should be able to consume peer reviews. They don't necessarily have to be the places where the peer reviews are carried out, though. And we also want to see repositories being able to message to each other and consume messages. So that's basically it in a nutshell. Now, in terms of the content, we really want to go beyond the metadata record. The metadata records are causing many issues. For example, for someone like me who runs a content aggregator, its metadata records are a big problem because many metadata records don't even provide links to content. Therefore, aggregating content from across repositories is a particularly difficult job. We want this job to be simplified. We want to see repositories to expose more types of data, in particular data citations, information about which resources are related from across repositories, maybe versions of different articles, and perhaps also moving beyond the PDF. We want repositories to expose user interaction data so that we can build better global services for repositories. We want to see scholars being able to comment on certain articles, and if that same article is, for example, deposited in another repository, those comments should be visible to other people as well. We want to see peer reviews, repositories being able to consume peer reviews, and we want to see people being able to annotate and repositories being able to consume annotations of research articles. There are three vertical discovery mechanisms which we see. In the past, in repositories and the current repositories, we have only batch discovery. We want to see navigation, which is basically about helping robots to find resources in repositories by means of searching and going and following the links, basically as humans would do. And we want to see notifications, so basically enabling robots to subscribe to certain changes in repositories, for example, to certain authors or to particular topics. Now, when we look at the user stories, which we've developed as part of the COAR Next Generation Repositories Working Group, I kind of took the liberty to divide them into three categories: discovery and exposing resources, stories which address research workflows and life cycle, and stories that address research evaluation. By no means this is an exhaustive list. This is only a list which we see as kind of user stories that should be prioritized. And if you have other ideas, then please let us know. I would like now to mention one particular functionality which we think is quite important. We would like to see repositories to enable something we call a global sign-in or global sign-on. As a user, I want my repository to recognize me and other users so that I can be connected with others who I know, leave comments, and be informed of content that is of interest to me. We want basically repositories to enable a functionality where when I go to a particular article in one repository and then I leave and I go to another one, that new repository should still be able to recognize me. And that is important because what we feel we should enable is building some sort of a social network over repositories. Many people use academia, Mendeley, ResearchGate, these kinds of social networks. And unfortunately, these systems are basically causing the repositories to become a little bit obsolete in a sense that repositories then don't get so many user interactions, and then therefore we can't build so good services on top of them. And we want to change that. We want a transparent world where anyone can build applications, and therefore, and repositories are quite well suited for that, but we need more interoperability in repositories to enable this. So the components of a social network are enabling annotations, enabling commenting, enabling notification fields. Recommender systems have been also found very successful in building social network, on helping social networks. And really the novelty here is we don't want to repeat academia, Mendeley, ResearchGate. The problem with these systems is that they might be pretty useful, but they don't enable anyone else to build new services on top of them. The novelty is here that we want to be open and transparent in a distributed environment. So finally, I'd like to mention research evaluation. One of the things that we feel is that in terms of, for example, altmetrics, a lot of people focused on altmetrics and the measuring of downloads and these kinds of things. And we've received certain comments even during the consultation. For example, one person said that repositories should not expose direct links to full-text documents, and that was purely because if the repositories basically, or if content is duplicated in many repositories, then according to that person, it's difficult to measure the usage. And we strongly disagree with that. We really see that the dissemination of, or feel that the dissemination of knowledge is far more important than being able to accurately measure downloads. And there are ways how to make altmetrics more accurate without kind of jeopardizing that function of repositories. So this is something we're totally aware of. We also want to support open citations, and there are some initiatives which are at the moment working in that area. And when in terms of peer reviews, we feel that repositories are perhaps not the places where peer reviews happen, but repositories should be able to consume open peer reviews and be able to display them together with the articles. So in terms of current work, I think Eloy already mentioned that we want to look deeper into each use case, identify possible technologies, and provide recommendations. Finally, I'd like to mention that I feel that we need to be kind of competitive with the commercial offerings. We are not working against the commercial offerings, but by making repositories more interoperable, we believe that we create opportunities for everyone to also, both for us academics to take control of our scholarly outputs, but also for commercial publishers or for any kind of technology companies that want to develop value-added services on top of repository content. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. So our next speaker is Rick Johnson. He's a program director for digital initiatives and scholarship at University of Notre Dame, and I think he probably has the most challenging presentation because he's going to try to explain to you our conceptual model, which is quite complex at this time.
Yeah, so as Eloy mentioned, this is very much a draft and it's still in progress, but this is a look into how the group is thinking about this. So looking, thinking about this aspect, it's really about the actual resources themselves being things that services can interact with independent of what repositories they may be in, et cetera. So it's really how can we realize that vision that Eloy was talking about earlier about how open access repositories can really have the resources exposed in such a way that it doesn't matter where those things are. So thinking about the various types of resources that we want to be able to have exposed through repositories, that what's really represented in this diagram is really intentional to try to show the diversity of the kinds of resources that really need to be exposed alongside one another. And one of the important aspects there, if you notice the aggregate resource object in the middle, that is really meant to tie those things together and thinking about these things as resources that are just independent of where they may reside, which services will talk to them, et cetera. And you'll notice there's also workflow resources, there's data, derivatives of data. So what's really intentionally implied here is that there may be multiple actors upon things. They may be stored in multiple places. So looking ahead, so thinking about how this conceptual model works, you'll notice that one of the resources in repository A, for example, there's something in repository B, repository F, but really is what intended here is that these things can be interacted with independent of where those things are. And then also within the storage layer underneath, they may be stored in multiple organizations. And when we were working this diagram, it also intentionally, when I was touching this up, I left out organization F on purpose because that could represent where there is actually no like official organization for a repository, but it may be something shared, et cetera. So then thinking about how you would layer services onto this, the idea here is so delving into all of those use cases that Peter was just going into more detail on, how can we have all of these resources exposed in such a way that they're all accessible. So one of the key aspects that I haven't touched upon yet is all of those things are intended to have, the idea is having a URI, so that as the mechanism that is envisioned to be one of the primary ways that these resources are exposed, but that is a bit of a hypothetical at the moment. So don't I would encourage you not to fixate too much on the URI as the technology mechanism yet. Those are things that are that we are going through at the moment. And I think I would also encourage you to let go of the term repository as well at times, because I think we don't want to have that be a limiting factor in terms of how people have thought what the definition of a repository is in the past, but really thinking about repositories within this overall model as one kind of layer within that. So the repository being where something might be stored, but it doesn't define how those things are interacted with, how they're tied together, et cetera. So the other piece that is in there with those indexes is that what is assumed at the moment is there's some mechanism that's either centralized or distributed that is allowing those things to be exposed in a global sense. So then how we actually do that, those are things that the group is still working through. So very much, again, why this is still a conceptual model or a draft. So then the other aspect here is that what's been added in there is that we envision having content be easily exchanged and mirrored between sites. So again, it's not a negative that something may be in more than one repository. It's very much a positive. So where as things become much more accessible on a global scale, where do various institutional nodes fit in? Being a mirror of many different content is a pretty worthwhile way for institutions to contribute to this overall scale. So this is one other aspect that the group has been thinking about. So to summarize some of the key underlying concepts in there. So each of those resources kind of on that global scale have a URI. They may or may not be connected. They may not be physically stored in the same repository. So again, that should not matter. Then those services that you layer on top of those could mirror, utilize, enhance, enrich, derive from, et cetera. Then also the actual registry of those. Again, these are some of the technical details that we're still starting to think through, but it could be centralized, it could be a distributed set of indexes, but still some kind of coordination is happening where those things can be used in concert with one another. So these are some of the aspects that we're really starting to get into, and that Andrea and David will go into in a minute here.
Thanks, Rick. So now we have Andrea Bolini, who's the Chief Technology Officer for COAR Science, and I think he will be presenting on behalf of also David Wilcox, the Fedora Product Manager.
Okay, hi. So I'm talking of the technology aspect that are involved with COAR Next Generation Repository. Essentially, what we want to achieve is a new level of interoperability. What has been said up to now is that in the past year, we focus on interoperability at the repository level. Now we are thinking to move this interoperability level at the level of the single resources and below. So this will allow the repository to be the fundamental of the new ecosystem of the scholarly output. I have a couple of technology that we have identified up to now as a good example of technology for this purpose. The first one is the AAAF. You have followed some presentation over this conference about the AAAF. Is the International Image Interoperability Framework. It is a set of shared API and provide access to image-based resources. It is focused on strong interoperability and resources that can be distributed across several repositories. So, in the context of AAAF, what is an interoperability resource? They define an interoperability resource as something that is discoverable, viewable as using API, can be manipulated, can be cited, can be shared, can be annotated. So can be used and reused to produce new research. It is relevant in the context of next generation repository because it is a concrete example of technology that enable interoperability at the resource level. So when I talk about resource level, if you think about a collection of images, maybe a manuscript with several pages, the interoperability is at the single level of the single page in the manuscript, or also in the single region of a portion of the image of manuscript, where a comment from a researcher in the world can help another researcher in their research. So a concrete example, this comes from the slide of Tom Kramer. It is from a manuscript of the Bibliothèque Municipale de Châteauroux in France. For some reason, a manuscript has been distributed. I need to say that. So the page was be splitted and the miniature was go to another institute. Now the manuscript with the miniature is in the Bibliothèque Virtuelle de Municipes, and the miniature is in the Bibliothèque Nationale Française. So what the researchers are able to do using AAAF is to virtually reconstruct the manuscript. So this can happen in French, can happen when you have manuscript distributed globally, and you can put images that are original together, or you can put together images that are related. And this is a very concrete example of interoperability at the resource level, under the resource level, because it's single portion of a specific image. So AAAF and repository already talk, and there are several projects ongoing in the repository community to provide AAAF technology in the space, in Fedora, in Hydra, and you here see a link to the ongoing discussion for the space community. I will have a presentation tomorrow where you will see an example of AAAF technology for the space repositories. Similar to what I see for images, you can extend this discussion also to other kind of data set. So if you talk about tabular data set and you want to go inside the data set to look to raw data, to be able to manipulate the raw data without extract all this information from the repository. So the repository should be a live tool that can be accessed by the researcher to run analysis using our script or something else. In the context of tabular data, you have the open data web services provided by CCAN. And also, we provide a DSpace CCAN integration that allow you to use these services with DSpace. Another important technology is signposting. About that, there are several presentations in this conference. So signposting essentially is an approach to make the scholarly output more friendly with machine. So one of the most difficult, the most challenge for crawler right now is to find the relation between landing page and full text, for instance. It's obvious for a human, which is the full text in a web page, but is not so obvious for a machine. So signposting tell you a very simple way to expose this relation using HTTP links header in a way that is understandable by crawler. And in the same way, you can create a relation, expose the graph relation of your resources so that your Scholar output is related to your ORCID profile, or your DOI is related to your landing page, is related to your PDF file. Making this information available for researchers allow to build a better service on top of this information. And a concrete example of signposting, here you see a publication from Herbert van de Sompel with a DOI, and there are several ORCID involved by the author. So what we are saying is if you query the landing page just using the curl command line tool, you will get back some header, HTTP headers that say this DOI refers to another location. As you know, DOI is just a redirect to the actual location. You get the actual location that in this case is the landing page of the article, but this article is also related to the ORCID ID of the researcher. And other signpost pattern give you the relation between this landing page to the actual full text and so on. So the new version of DSpace Chris actually implement the signposting pattern. Also some development ongoing on the Fedora community, on the other repository community. And we hope to have this signposting pattern also implemented in DSpace 7. Just to complete my presentation, we are talking about interoperability at the resource level. So it is really important to keep as much detailed information as you have. So we need probably to revise the current data model of the repository to allow a better definition of identification of person, organization, project, and concept. Identifier are the key here. The last technology. OIPMH has done a great job in the last year to aggregate content between repository, but is not enough, don't scale very well. So it's time to update. And the new technology is already here, since some year now. So it's ready to be adopted by the repository community. It is faster, it's reliable and scalable, and it also allows real-time communication. So you can subscribe notification from specific resources, from specific set. So it's not only a way to aggregate together repository to have interoperability between repository, but it is also the fundamental to create interoperability between resources. You can notify for change so that you can become aware of annotation, you can be aware of citation and so on. It's really important. And also in this case, there are already some ongoing work on the repository community. There is a first implementation of resourcing that is a bit out of date for the space that should be resumed. And we have just created a ticket in the Jira trouble ticketing system for the space to track these needs for the community. And Hydra in a Box team also have started some interesting test experience with Resource Sync, and they show great value, and this test is ongoing, and we hope to have this implemented. So I give hand to Eloy to the conclusion. Thank you.
So just a couple of comments before I talk about our next steps. You know, this is more than just about technology. I think the technology is critical, but it's really about repositioning repositories to play a more central and valuable role in scholarly communication. And it's about trying to transform the system to one that's more equitable, more inclusive, and more open, a system that encourages greater innovation by supporting and providing access to and recognition to a broader range of contributions. But I think for this to work, for us to really change the system, we kind of have to coalesce the community around a common vision, and that's not always easy to do. And we also need to recognize, and again, another thing that's not always easy to do is that repositories in a system that will be transformed have to play a dual role. So they will showcase the institutional assets and what your institution has, but they will also be nodes in a global knowledge commons. And I wanted to say a couple of things about why we think a distributed environment is really important. So I think we see a lot of innovations around preprint repositories now and centralized services. But for us, the distributed nature of the system is very important for a couple of reasons. First, it's less likely to be bought out by a large commercial entity, and it's also less likely to fail due to lack of funds because it's distributed. But also, I think it solves some of the issues that we currently have around lack of visibility and recognition for research problems in regions outside of North America and Europe. And it's really important that we, as we move forward to develop a better and more open system, that a distributed system supports the local needs and the local research needs of different regions. And so one of the things that I think we at the working group are acutely aware of is that this is not going to be an easy rollout in terms of the technology. This is the easy part, identifying the technology, but getting those technology adopted in repositories and repository platforms may not be as a simple process. And then, you know, there are over 3,000 repositories around the world, so trying to support that global community in terms of upgrading their systems to adopt the new technologies is also something that we know will be very challenging. So here are our next steps. We will continue to work on the conceptual model, and we expect that there will be a number of different models that speak to different types of communities, some more technical and some less so. We want to be able to publish our technical recommendations by September. And then the hard work will be to promote the adoption of these new technologies in the platforms, work with the repository platforms, support upgrading, and then facilitate the development of network services, that network layer on top of the more open and interoperable repositories. And I feel myself that there's some urgency to this, that if we don't do it now, we're going to get left behind, and others will come in, mainly commercial entities will come in and do this work for us, and we will end up not with an open system. So On that note, I encourage you to support us, and we strongly support you in moving together as a community. And I think I will open it to questions from the floor now. So are there any questions? We have a microphone here. Sure. I think it's not turned on. You might have to press the button.
Okay, oh yeah, there we go. It's a fascinating vision, and I think there's clearly a huge amount of work that's gone into it, which I think is really great. And I actually really like, it took me a little bit of a while to get my head around the user stories to start with, but when you put them up, I think it was a really good place to start from. I think I like that. But I did write a question down about whether or not, how much do you think it's going to be important that this does talk to sort of other to commercial organisations, commercial ventures, things like ResearchGate, things like academia.edu. Do you see that as part of the vision at all? Or do you think we have to build something that is separate to that? Because they are the big elephant in the room when we talk about repositories with academics. They say, well, why do we need them? Because we've got all our stuff in ResearchGate.
Does anyone else want to answer that, or should I?
So, from my perspective, I see academia, ResearchGate, and so on as services which take the knowledge, and then they basically are kind of closed platforms where because they don't really provide an API, Mendeley provides an API, but it's still kind of restricted. It doesn't give us access to the content, for example, and a lot of stuff is not accessible or not doable via that API. I think we are also worried in general about what are the intentions of those who run these kind of social networks, and it seems to us that they don't want to share because they want to compete with each other. And I think that's what we don't want to see. We want to create a transparent, open system where anyone can hook in, whether you are a technology provider and a company, or whether you are a library and or a university. So really, a transparent, open system based on interoperability. It's not against anyone. It's actually for the good of all of us.
If I just can add on this, I think our vision again is to have the resources, open and interoperable resources at the center. And then all services can be built around them. So commercial services can be built around them if they add value to that. But the foundational layer, and that's the big difference, the foundational layer is open, interoperable resources. So, and then if you have a value, if you provide value added, if you add value to that, then you can build other services that can be commercial or open or other models.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add that, we have to do this right if we want to compete with those services. We want to pull people away from ResearchGate and academia.eu. We actually have to do this right. So it's pretty important, I think. Yeah. Just wait for the microphone if you can.
Thank you. I'm Vladimir from COAR University. Is our diversity our biggest enemy, in a sense? And this sort of distribution, which is, in a sense, great, but we need to get together, as you said, really quickly, because those commercial entities, and I have one in particular in mind, are really focused on getting into this space, and they are actually in that space already. Universities want one-stop shop solution, easy management of stuff, and are we late to the table? That's my question.
I kind of missed the first part of the first sentence, maybe.
It is the worry that we are distributed,
yeah,
and we're trying to get together and do this together, and commercial entities are very well organized, enormous money potential behind them, and they're already in this space and doing this. So is diversity our biggest enemy?
Yeah, I think it's one of our biggest challenges. It's our biggest asset, but it's one of our biggest challenges. And that's one of the things we talked about at our initial meeting with the group is how can we create a global brand for a distributed network of repositories. So I think there's a lot of advocacy, branding work that we could do. We're thinking about how we might do that, but again, we have a lot less resources than some of our competitors, shall we say. So I think it's a good point, and I don't know if I have an answer for you. Rick maybe has a comment.
I think one thing to add on, even though we are fairly diverse, the actual number of platforms at play, I think, is still fairly small. So if the platforms themselves can get around similar concepts of exchange and publishing content, then I think it becomes much more doable.
I would also like to comment on that question about diversity. Actually, I think it's... Sorry? Yeah, Wolfram Horst on Göttingen State and University Library. Also a little bit involved in COAR. I actually think that diversity is our friend, because as Kathleen was saying, that this system that is very distributed can respond to diversity while others cannot. Of course, there is still a challenge, and this shouldn't sound naive, and we're not there yet. But in general, repositories have local managers that know about the local landscape and the needs of the researchers and the diversity of needs and of different data types and so on. So actually, I think this is one of the routes that we should further follow up in order to compete. I wouldn't even call it competition. I think it's just a different fallback system that has to be built in this world, as the library system has been built over centuries.
Any more comments? We've got time for a couple more. One right at the back.
Pardon? Oh, hi, I'm Laura Hanscom from MIT, and I was curious to get the viewpoint of the panel on what they think on unpaywall, and is that an example of the kind of thing you're talking about, building on that openness to make things more accessible, not just for the academic community, but for the global community at large?
I mean, I think unpaywall, in our vision, we wouldn't need unpaywall because everything, all the resources would be openly available, and that's what we're aiming for. So I think unpaywall is a helpful tool during a transition period when we move from a closed or a mixed system to a more open system. Anyone else want to comment?
Getting my exercise. Everyone else is going to have to stand up to get their exercise.
Thanks. In terms of diversity, I just wonder if there's even more of a diversity than we realise. In the policy, government, NGO space, there's a huge number of observatories, clearinghouses, all sorts of databases that come and go, and how we can sort of bring them into this conversation, which is often sort of more academia focused. Because there's a lot of money goes into that and often gets wasted, and so it seems like in some ways we're not providing enough bespoke solutions or customizable solutions to create those sort of spaces where organisations can profile themselves. That's what they're looking for, that's why they do it themselves, and yet then we don't get the preservation and we don't get the good management, and so it's not really linking into the best practice that we kind of know in the repository community. Sorry, it's Amanda Lawrence from APO.
Well, I think that's really what libraries should be doing, and that's the role of libraries, and we should be stronger as libraries stepping into that space to provide those solutions to the different departments and organizations in our in whatever space we happen to work in. And I think libraries have been kind of getting a bad rap as we moved into the digital environment, but I really think the role for libraries is more important than ever, and we should be taking the lead in terms of offering those kind of solutions to our user groups, whether that be in government or academia or the cultural sector.
Just like to add something that you mentioned, for example, that preservation is a problem. Well, the reason why preservation is a problem is that we don't have any concept of content interoperability at the moment built into repositories. Building preservation solutions is incredibly difficult. So what this group is trying to do, we're trying to put more interoperability into repositories so that better solution and a wider variety of solutions can actually be provided. And by making this possible, I think we will probably bring people who will say, okay, suddenly I can do something, so they will possibly, we might see some sort of investment coming from various kind of places because they say, oh, actually, I can now achieve this, so let's do it.
All right, well, on that, I think we'll end. That was a great talk. I would encourage everyone to get in contact with Kathleen and the rest of the team during the rest of the conference if you've got feedback on it, and there'll be plenty more things coming on your website, I guess, over the next few months. So thank you very much for that really great presentation.